This video is brought to you by togetherbudget.com. The origins of our money mindset can be traced back to our childhood experiences. Think about it, how did your parents or caregivers handle finances? Did they budget, save, and invest?
That's a great point. My parents were quite frugal, but also risk-averse. They never invested in the stock market because they were afraid of losing their savings.
Exactly. And that fear is often passed down through generations. It's not just about what our parents did, but also how we saw them react to financial stress or uncertainty.
I never thought of it that way. But now I realize that my own fears about money are rooted in my childhood experiences.
And that's where the power lies, in recognizing and challenging those patterns. By becoming aware of our money mindset, we can begin to break free from the limitations of our past.
Let's talk about the role of societal influences on our money mindset. How do you think media and advertising impact how we think about money?
The media and advertising industries are masters at shaping our desires and values. They create an illusion that certain lifestyles or possessions are necessary for happiness.
That's so true. I mean, have you seen those ads for luxury cars or designer clothing? They're always telling us that we need the latest and greatest to be successful or attractive.
Exactly. And it's not just about what we see in ads, but also how we perceive our peers' success. Social media can create unrealistic expectations and a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out.
I never thought about it that way, but now I realize that social media is actually contributing to my own financial stress.
Another key influencer on our money mindset is our personal values. What do you think drives your financial decisions?
I would say that I value security and stability above all else. I want to make sure I have a safety net in case of an emergency.
That's a common value, but one that can also hold us back from taking risks or investing in ourselves. Can you think of times when your desire for security led to missed opportunities?
Actually, yes. I remember passing up on an investment opportunity because it seemed too risky.
And what do you think would have happened if you had taken that risk and invested in yourself? So, let's talk about the psychology of spending. When we think about our finances, most of us focus on the end goal, saving money, paying off debt, investing for the future.
That's right. But what about the process itself? How do we make decisions about how to spend our money in the first place?
Well, it all comes down to impulse versus intentional spending. Impulse spending is like a knee-jerk reaction. We see something and just feel like we need it.
I'm guilty of that. Like, I'll be browsing online and I'll see this amazing pair of shoes and suddenly I'm convinced I need them.
Exactly. And that's because our brains are wired to respond to instant gratification. We get a dopamine hit from buying something new.
But intentional spending is different, right? That's when we take the time to think about what we really need versus what we just want.
Intentional spending isn't just about making lists or budgeting. It's about aligning our purchases with our values and goals.
That makes sense. But how do we actually make those decisions? Like, what criteria should we use to evaluate whether something is worth buying?
Well, one strategy is to ask yourself questions like, will this purchase align with my long-term goals, or is there a better alternative that will achieve the same result?
That's so simple but so effective. Like, I never thought about it in those terms before.
And it's not just about the financial aspect either. Intentional spending is also about considering the environmental and social impact of our purchases.
I love that you brought up sustainability. That's such an important part of this conversation.
Now, I want to talk about the role of emotions in spending. We've already discussed how instant gratification can drive impulse purchases.
Right, but what about other emotions like guilt or anxiety?
Those emotions can be particularly powerful triggers for spending. For example, someone might feel guilty for not buying their loved one a gift, even if they don't have the budget.
That's so true. I've done that before. It's like we're trying to buy our way out of feeling bad.
Exactly. And it's not just about guilt either. Anxiety and stress can also drive impulsive spending as a form of self-soothing.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
When we think about financial uncertainty, it's easy to get caught up in worst-case scenarios.
That's right. And I think that's where risk tolerance comes in. Can you explain what that means for our listeners?
Exactly. And resilience is another crucial factor when it comes to dealing with financial uncertainty.
Can you tell us more about that? How do we build resilience in the face of uncertainty?
One of the most important things to remember is that uncertainty is not a fixed state. It can change and evolve over time.
That's so true. And I think it's also worth noting that our risk tolerance and resilience can also evolve over time. As we face new challenges and experiences, our comfort levels with risk can shift.
Welcome to this section of our masterclass, where we'll be exploring the power of mindful money management in achieving financial freedom. Let's start by defining what mindfulness means in the context of personal finance.
I think it's essential to clarify that mindfulness isn't just about being present in the moment, it's also about being aware of one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors related to money.
That's right. Mindfulness in finance involves cultivating an awareness of one's values, needs, and desires when it comes to money. Can you give us some examples of how this plays out in real life?
Absolutely. For instance, being mindful means recognizing that buying a new gadget isn't just about the initial cost but also about ongoing expenses like maintenance, upgrades, and potential damage to other belongings.
I think it's also important to discuss how mindfulness can influence budgeting strategies. How do you recommend our listeners apply these principles to their own financial planning?
When creating a mindful budget, prioritize needs over wants and allocate funds accordingly. It's also crucial to regularly review and adjust spending habits based on changing circumstances or new insights gained from mindfulness practices.
When we experience financial trauma, it's like a scar on our psyche. It can make us feel anxious, fearful, and even paralyzed when it comes to making financial decisions.
That makes sense. I've seen people who have been through bankruptcy or foreclosure become extremely risk-averse in their financial lives.
Exactly. They may be so fearful of experiencing another financial setback that they miss out on opportunities for growth and progress.
And it's not just about the money. It's also about the emotional toll it takes on a person's self-worth.
Absolutely. When we experience financial trauma, it can make us feel like we're not good enough, that we're somehow flawed or inadequate. So how do we unlearn this financial trauma? One key step is to acknowledge the past but not let it define our future.
That's so important. We can't change what's happened, but we can change how we respond to it.
Exactly. And that means letting go of the guilt and shame associated with past financial mistakes.
But it's not just about letting go. It's also about learning from our mistakes and using those lessons to inform our future decisions.
That's a great point. And it means being kind and compassionate with ourselves as we work through this process. Another key step is to reframe our relationship with money. Instead of seeing it as a source of stress and anxiety, we can see it as a tool for freedom and abundance.
That's such an important shift in perspective. When we change how we think about money, we can start to make different choices and create a more prosperous future.
Exactly. And that means being open to new ideas and possibilities, rather than getting stuck in a fixed mindset.
And it's not just about individual action. We can also work to create positive change in our communities and society as a whole.
That's the ultimate goal of financial freedom, not just personal prosperity, but collective well-being and abundance for all. This tutorial is brought to you by Malik Abwalzait.